welcome everyone to episode 1. That's right, the first ever episode of War of the Stars, a Star Wars roundtable podcast. We are coming to you from deep within the darkest levels of Coruscant, far beyond the watchful eyes of the Empire. Joining me today, is, first of all, the man who is partly responsible for me even being here today. He is the host of Breaking the Fourth Wall, Mr. Christopher Stoley.
What's up, everybody?
Also, joining me today for this panel, he is the host of the YouTube channel, my mind just went blank, the Star Wars Canon Library.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Brian Miller.
Hey, how you guys doing?
And joining me also is Matthew. Don't remember what your last name is, dude.
It's Matthew Cruz, sir.
Okay.
Cruz, sir. So formal.
Cruz, sir. Whoa. All right, well, let's get this started. So in episode 1, we're just basically going to be telling our Star Wars story. What is it about these series of movies that really made it stand out more than other movies may have? What made this go beyond this just being like, oh, this is a cool movie, I like this movie too, something that you guys became passionate about? What about the Star Wars movies? What was it that really captured your attention about it? Brian, what would we start with you?
Okay, actually, my first experience with Star Wars wasn't even one of the films. When I was a kid, I was 6 or 7 years old probably, and like every 6 or 7 year old, you're in Walmart and you're with your parents and you want to buy a toy, and it was the mid-'90s, and back then it was the Micro Machines, the Micro Machine sets that were like the character's head that opened up into a play set, and I found Darth Vader's that opened up into Bespin and everything, and I didn't even know what Star Wars was, and I was just like, I want this toy, I just got it because it looked cool. And then it was a few months later, my mother told me that on the Sci-Fi Channel, they were going to be showing all of the Star Wars films one a night, and she was going to record them for me, and I was just like, all right, cool, whatever, I'll watch them. And she showed me the Star Wars films, and from then on, it opened my eyes to a world that I could relate to because when I was a kid, I was bullied a lot in school, in elementary school and junior high. I was bullied a lot, and to be able to have something like that I could relate to, as far as, just not even really. I don't want to say relate to. That's not the right phrase. Something that could influence me in a way. Every short story I ever wrote afterwards was Star Wars. Every toy I ever bought was Star Wars. Everything I ever did was Star Wars after that. Every picture I ever drew, everything. And I caught a lot of crap from my dad about it, as I got older and the prequels started to come out and started to buy all these Star Wars toys. And he's like, I don't know why you're wasting all your money on this. And all my mother could say was, well, at least he's not spending it on heroin, but it's something that touched me in a way that it's a world that's so, what's the word I'm looking for?
Colorful?
Colorful, fantastic. Stuff like it's so inspiring, so I got tongue-tied. Like with a lot of you guys, it's inspired you guys to really speak out your opinions on Star Wars, and start YouTube channels, everything like that. And it's really impacted my life in a way I can't even really explain.
Yeah.
So.
What about you, Chris?
Star Wars was my babysitter. I'm probably the oldest person on the panel here. I'm 40 years old. I'm as old as the franchise. I was 5 months old when Episode 4 first released in theaters, and my mother and father actually took me to see it at 5 months old at the midnight release. And I don't remember, but my family will tell you the story is I was fussy, I was fighting, I was crying until the crawl came up. As soon as the first bang, and they said I shut up and I watched the whole movie. I've been at every midnight premiere ever since, and it borders on an obsession for me. Really, what inspires me about Star Wars isn't so much about Star Wars, although I love the stories, I love the characters, I'm inspired by George Lucas. The writer, the maverick who refused to conform to the norms of Hollywood, which is what pushed him to push the boundaries the way he did, and the way he created Lucasfilm and subsequently ILM, Skywalker Sound, and the like, influenced me as a musician, as a pro wrestler for a number of years. It influenced me in just podcasting. I mean, Jesus, Star Wars, the idea of doing a podcast in general came from watching Collider's Jedi Council. I was watching a podcast about Star Wars. Like, it's always been something that's just consumed my life.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. You know, I have to admit, watching, for all the grief that Star Wars fans of the years have given to George, and even myself, I've questioned some of the stuff he's done. Watching him come out at Celebration this year did, I admit, bring a little bit of a tear to my eye. Mm-hmm. That was
good times.
That was very cool to watch, to see that. And
yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes. Indeed.
So, Eric, we'll go with you next. What does Star Wars mean to you?
Who's Eric?
Oh, I'm sorry. Wow.
Really? You got me confused with Eric? Ouch. Oh, that was painful.
Hey, just remember, we're not on fourth wall. Just remember, we're not on fourth wall. You can curse on this one.
Oh, yeah. Thanks oh, really? Thanks a fucking lot. There. That would be me. For me, it was the mystery of it all. It was the mystery, the magical side. It was space. It was my two favorite things: mysticism and sci-fi. It combined the story of like King Arthur and samurai and space adventures and Flash Gordon and you know, watching kung fu flicks growing up as well. It was everything wrapped into one. Everything was there that I loved to watch, and every time I watched it growing up, because I remember I was born in '77 as well. I was a little too young to see it, unfortunately, but I do remember seeing Empire in theaters. I do remember that, and I guess, you know, everyone's like, "Oh, you were lucky you got to see it in theaters." I was like, "Yeah," but I barely remember it. But to me, it was like every individual character stuck out to you. You knew the Skywalkers, but like, you know, you had Boba Fett, you had Chewbacca, you had Yoda, you had C-3PO, you had R2-D2, you had everybody. Everybody was there. Even Lando Calrissian. You were like, oh man, this guy, what did he do? How did he get where he was? Everything, you know, and then you had the things that whet our appetite as well, the books that became legend, the ones that unfold every little nook and cranny of that universe. So everywhere you turn, you never got bored with it. For such a simple idea, it had so much of an influence on everything we do. And like Chris said with his music, for me, it was my writing. I mean, because right now, I mean, with what I'm coming up with as at home for DMing as well, it's inspired by what he thought was just good for a time frame, hashed it out and put it into his world and made it relevant.
Yeah. So we'll start with who looks like to be the youngest of the group, Mario.
Yeah.
How did you become a fan, and what does Star Wars mean to you?
Well, the first movie I watched was actually Revenge of the Sith, actually, in theaters. So, you know, I was about 9 to 10. So, you know, as a young kid, seeing lasers, laser swords, you know, robots, aliens, spaceships, everything in space, you know, that really appeals to a young kid. So it really appealed to me at a young age, you know. Yeah, it's not the best of the movies, but, you know, I grew up with the prequel trilogy, really. So I grew up with them, and then my father actually showed me the original trilogy, which I had seen, you know, episode 1, 2, and 3. Those are my first ones that I watched. So I watched the original trilogy after, and it actually, you know, it took a while for me to actually realize, you know, the impact of the original trilogy, what it actually did for cinema as a whole and just for, you know, the world. And then once I actually noticed, you know, and realized what a good movie was, I realized how much better the original trilogy was than the prequel trilogy. And always, you know, the prequel trilogy will always hold that place as my, I guess you say, my age, that fit, you know, my age. And that was what I grew up with. But the original trilogy is still favored by me. And it just really showed, you know, watching it with my father, it kind of was like a bonding experience. So it always holds that nostalgia for me. And it just kind of gave me a home, you know. It just gave, because, you know, you can, like, have differences with people, but if you're a Star Wars fan, you're a friend with someone instantly. You know, you don't have to know anything about them. You just know they like Star Wars, and you guys are friends instantly. It just gives you like a family pretty much everywhere you go.
Yeah, that's one thing I did, and I don't know about where you guys were at, but that I did, at least here, that I did miss about the last two Star Wars movies that we didn't have was when the prequels come out, I remember the lines. Like, you would have lines, people waiting in line for days and days, camping out. And for me, that was one thing, like I said, I don't know if you had that there through this time around, but here you didn't really see that. But that was one thing that I liked about that was these group of peoples that were from all walks of life, all races, creeds, colors, they all had one thing in common. They love Star Wars.
Well, I think,
and I also like the makeup of this panel. You know, we have people here who were around, at least old enough to remember some of the original trilogy, you know, to be old enough to have seen in theaters. For me, Jedi was the first movie I ever seen in a theater. That wasn't like a cartoon or a kid's movie. It was Return of the Jedi.
okay.
We have someone, I mean, and I think all of us were basically, like, I cannot remember a time without Star Wars. It just has always been there. For me, what really got me to be a fan was the books. Reading the Timothy Zahn novels. That just, you know, Star Wars, before that, Star Wars was always something that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Little side note, Timothy Zahn actually used to live nearby where I live. He went to school at the University of Illinois and in Champaign-Urbana, which is about 30 minutes away from me. So a little, but reading those books, that's just really captured my imagination. And, you know, just the imagination, being someone who is an actor and interested in filmmaking and stuff like that, seeing how that whole thing, how they made the movies, and just how cutting edge everything was, even the original, I mean, especially the original trilogy. So cutting edge, so just, I couldn't even imagine to have been there and seen what that was like at that time. You know, we look at it now and, you know, even today, though, I mean, some of the special effects still hold up.
I was going to say that.
I mean,
you look at recently with Force Awakens and Rogue One, and you take a look at their special effects. Yeah, there is a little bit of more CGI, obviously, than what there was back in 77 through 83, but really, you can't tell much of a difference between them in 40 years.
Yeah, a lot of those Star Destroyer shots look like model shots. You know.
Yeah, they were very meticulous.
You know?
But that actually shows why there's so much dedication. That's fan service.
Yeah.
They put that much detail where we can't tell the difference. That's what this franchise means, even to the creators. There's not a lot of franchises out there that you can say that about.
Yeah.
Well, I especially think, and I could be wrong here, but I especially think it's because Star Wars isn't so much like to its community, to its fan base. It isn't so much about like a theatrical experience, although it really is, and we do pass it down to our children, our grandchildren, whatever. But I really think that Star Wars is the last true folklore of not only of America but of the world. Mm-hmm. It's almost like music. It's like a universal language. Everybody knows Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know, whether they're a fan of it or not, you still know who Darth Vader is. You still know who Princess Leia is. I mean, it's just, it speaks to everybody in some way, shape, or form. And whether it was completely intended by George Lucas or not, which obviously we know it wasn't, it became something so much more than what he had intended. And I think that's a wonderful thing, you know, personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, not just what he technically achieved for Hollywood and movies in general. Like, you can name a billion movies that came out like this past year that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Star Wars. But
Oh yeah.
but in reality, it's like I think culturally, everything changed thanks to George's storytelling.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, would someone like Harrison Ford, would he have the career that he had if he hadn't have gotten that one role?
Whether he likes it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know.
good point.
I mean,
Yeah.
that launched his career in many ways. I mean, yeah, he had American Graffiti and shortly after that, Indiana Jones, but
Right.
it was Star Wars was the one that really put him on the map and
I
made
don't know.
him.
And then you had a bunch of his own little movies that he did himself, The Fugitive, The
Yeah.
Patriot, all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I was saying. If he hadn't done Star Wars, would he have had the vehicle to do those other movies, or would he have just been another actor, or, would he have been the major superstar?
He'd still be a carpenter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah. But I mean, since you brought up Harrison Ford, I think, and this last celebration really showed it. And the one, when was it that he first came out? I want to say it was the one with the Force Awakens panel back in 2015, when they first brought Harrison Ford out on stage and nobody knew he was going to be there. And nobody expected him to be there just because he had acted like almost like he had been scorned in the past with Star Wars. And when he came out on stage, you could actually tell he was having fun again with it, and everything since then, even this past celebration when he was on stage, he looked like he was having fun with it, and the interviews, I mean, granted, he's not as enthusiastic as, we may not, we may necessarily like him to be, but I think he's starting to realize that movie is what made him who he is.
Well, if you've seen any interview with Harrison Ford, he makes it kind of a joke to act like he doesn't care about anything.
Yeah.
That's just Harrison, but
that's true.
I also think he's going through, to use someone from another franchise, what Leonard Nimoy went through with Spock, where he went through so long of, I don't care, I don't want nothing to do with this character, I want nothing to do with this character, to really embracing it. And I think maybe that's what we're seeing with Harrison, is he's finally, really truly embracing this character and realizing,
it.
Hey, this is who people will know me as, so I might as,
Might as well enjoy it.
Well, I think that's exactly it. I mean, Mark Hamill embraced the fact that he, for the rest of his life, is Luke Skywalker. Carrie Fisher had embraced for the rest of her life that she's Princess Leia. God rest her. But Harrison was always like, but I was Indiana Jones. I was Jack Ryan. I was this. I was that. He always wanted you to know that he was more than just Han Solo. And I think you're right. I think he finally came to the realization. It's like, you know what? You're right. I played those guys, but I am Han Solo. There's no escaping it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was too natural with it.
I was also very glad to see Hayden back at the panel.
Mm-hmm.
That was cool to see the warm reaction that the fans gave him.
Mm-hmm.
For all the crap the fans have given him for the.
I'm still here.
Hello. For the whole I hate sand thing, but
that wasn't his fault.
Yeah. Well, and again, not to harp on George, but George himself has said he's not the best at dialogue.
Right.
I think my favorite quote was from Harrison Ford was, "You like your shit, George, but you can't say it."
Yeah.
You can write this stuff, but you can't say it. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Hayden, like you said, I'm so glad they gave, not only that he showed up, but they gave him such a warm reception because of the fact that, like, a lot of the prequels hate was laid on his shoulders. I don't think he was as terrible of an actor as people made him out to be. I definitely think he had the look of Anakin Skywalker. I don't think he deserved the hatred he got.
Well, I could personally think of two scenes in episode 2 that he just was a tour de force. And he didn't say anything. The scene with, in the Tusken Raider camp when his mom dies.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that right there, no words, but showing so much emotion, and
Yeah.
you knew exactly what he was thinking. You knew exactly what he was trying to portray.
Yeah.
And that was just an amazing, I mean, right there. And even Palpatine himself.
Ian McDermott.
What's that?
Ian McDermott.
Ian McDermott had said in both him and Luke, even Luke got a lot of reputation of being not that great of an actor, but he said for both of them, you're only as good as the people you're playing next to.
Right.
And for someone that with that type of reputation to say, I was able to pull this type of performance out because of Mark Hamill and because of Hayden Christensen, just shows just how good of actors they really are.
No, absolutely. And, like another thing that a lot of the actors caught, particularly the ones that play Skywalkers, was they're whiny. They're whiny. I want to go to Tashi Station to pick up some power converters. I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough. You know what? Name a Skywalker that wasn't whiny. That's the character. That's the family trait. But
it could be a lot worse. It could be a hell of a lot worse.
But I think the biggest sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry.
And okay, so he acted a little whiny. I mean, I think Kevin Smith said it best. He goes, it's emo kids that go ahead and, try and conquer the world in the first place. They've always got something to prove anyway. They've got emotional instability, so they're going to go with it, And I'm like sitting there going, in his twisted way, he's absolutely correct. Because think about it. All those other kids are kind of, we got the ones that got accepted in society. They're like, well, I don't have to try that hard. It's like, I'm here. I'm cool with everybody. And everybody else is like, I'm the outcast. Screw you guys. I'm going to take over the world, and you're going to like it. And that's pretty much going to be it. I mean, the whiny emo kid's going to be the most motivated to do the most damage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the biggest surprise of Celebration to me, and even though he wasn't on a panel itself, the fact that he even showed up for the first time ever was Dennis Larson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wedge.
Yeah.
So
Wedge.
I'd like. You're the the Star Wars encyclopedia, I understand?
Oh, me?
Yeah, you.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe you can
At this
explain
point,
something that
apparently.
I didn't even know. What's
that?
the hatred or estrangement between Dennis Larson and the Star Wars franchise?
He looks at it as far as I've read and from what I've heard, he looks at it much the same way Harrison Ford did for a lot of years. That was what he was known as, was playing Wedge, and that's what nobody really knew of any of his other work. They just knew him as Wedge. He'd be walking down the street and somebody would come up and say, Wedge, and he'd like, no, what about other stuff, my other roles? And he wanted to focus more on theatrical acting, on stage stuff, instead of just film. And he was kind of put off by the fact that nobody really knew him as anything but Wedge.
Yeah.
So
Alec Guinness had the same problem with
with Obi-Wan.
Oh, yeah.
Not wanting to. In fact, there's stories that people would come up to say, I've seen Star Wars 300 times. Mm-hmm. And he would say, I'll only sign it if you promise never to watch it again. Or he would say, okay, can you name another one of my movies?
Yeah.
And then,
I never get an autograph from him then, because I only know him as Wedge Antilles.
Well, I was talking about Obi-Wan, Alec Guinness.
Oh, Alec Guinness.
Alec Guinness would say he'd only sign an autograph if you could name at least one other of his movies besides Star Wars.
Bridge
So
over
Lawrence
the River
Olivier.
Kwai.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, I've got that book somewhere.
Oh, and Death by Murder, another one.
Murder, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of redundant
I heard-
title, but still.
I heard about that quiz, so I started looking up his other roles just to know it, just in case that ever came up. Seriously, I was like, one day that.
Just in case you meet the
Well,
Force Ghost.
unless you could raise the dead.
Hey,
I know, right? I heard about that when I was a kid, and I was like, look, if this ever happens, I know it's like 1 in a million, but I'm gonna make sure I know at least one.
hey, they
I'll know-
resurrected Peter Cushing to reprise his role in Rogue One, so I mean, it could be possible.
Yeah. That's true.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, they did it to Brandon Lee first.
That is true.
Well, yeah.
the Crow. He what was it?
Yeah.
He was killed during the scene in the warehouse
where the guy shoots him.
Yeah,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
they still had like half the film left to go, and they pretty much just like superimposed his head on somebody else's body.
On a stunt double.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, even in Blu-ray, it's a little hard to tell, but I can point it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was, I mean, it was amazing, to see that, though, to see them bring.
See, I wonder. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
But sorry, it's okay. And Ellie, in the theater where I saw it at, that last scene with Leia, that brought an audible gasp to the audience when she turned around.
Yeah.
It was like,
Yeah.
because this was like we saw it just after she had passed.
Mhm.
Like I think like the day maybe 2 days after she had passed, and when she she turns around and she says the hope, everybody's like, this
Mhm.
Well, that,
again, God rest his soul. Is
Yeah.
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 Well, as far as Tarkin goes, even leading all the way up to the release of Rogue One, considering where the film took place on the timeline, we all assumed Tarkin had to be there. I mean, it was about the Death Star. He was in control of the Death Star. We all assumed that he had to be there in some way, shape, or form, and we weren't sure how they were going to. Because I heard rumors that they were going to bring back the guy that played Tarkin at the end of Episode 3 on the bridge from the far shot.
Yeah.
I heard rumors of that. I heard rumors of Guy Henry just playing Tarkin, not doing the CG, just playing Tarkin, and I mean, if he's got to be there, you've got to do it in a way. I mean, there's no way around it, at least I didn't think there was. I thought there was no way around it. You're just going to have to recast Tarkin. And then when he turns around, you're like, oh, okay, that's where we're going. Okay, that's cool. And at first it was a little jarring, I mean, as soon as you see his reflection in the window of the bridge before he turns around the first time, you're like, holy crap, are they really doing it? And then he turns around, and at first you're like, oh, okay, kudos for trying. You did the best you could. Let's just roll with it, And I know a lot of people make a lot of fun of it, but I think it looks absolutely great with Tarkin. And what they did with him was revolutionary, to be honest.
Yeah.
that's what I was gonna say. Well, I mean, was it by any means perfect on Leia or Tarkin at all? No.
No.
But it was damn close. I tell you what, if you would have darkened the skin a little bit, like made it a little darker, especially around the eye socket areas, because that's where it looked fake to me, was in the eyes itself. But if you would have lowered the lights, where you added more shadow to the complexion, I think you would have gotten away with it. You would have believed Peter Cushing was standing there.
Yeah.
It was that close.
Yeah, it was that close. It was. I mean, it was. I mean, like you said, there was that audible gasp, and it was like that. Literally, your heart was racing up until that moment, and your heart stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
When you saw Leia, and you were like, oh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. And it was like right in the feels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Going down.
Well, Leia also came right after a very strong adrenaline rush.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
that's
God,
100%.
yeah.
That last.
Oh,
the
yes.
last 5 minutes of Rogue One are just like emotional roller coaster.
Oh. It was like a horror. It was like a horror film, I mean, it's
No.
my jaw hit the floor and it stayed there until the credits started rolling. It was just like,
Hey, you know what?
Yeah.
Last night, I'm gonna pop this to the panel here. Last night, we've been picking on Matt at Fourth Wall for a while because he only recently this week seen Rogue One finally, and we were talking about the hallway scene. Okay, and I'm gonna pose a poll for everybody here since we're all hardcore Star Wars fans. The hallway scene. Who were you rooting for, the Rebels or Vader?
Vader, yeah.
Mario?
Vader, yeah, all the way.
I told you were by yourself in this, Matt.
I don't care. I'll stand alone on this one. I love holding an opposite view on this one. I was feeling for the Rebels. I felt like I was running alongside of them. I wanted to push the guy through the crack in the door. I wanted to if I had to give my life for that moment to Vader, I didn't care. It was that's how important those plans were to the Rebels. I was all the way with the Rebels. Sorry, I know it totally goes against what everyone's like, oh my God, Vader was total badass, which I totally agree with. I totally agree with. I do. I love it, right? But I felt for the rebels. I did. I wanted to help them get those plans out that door. I wanted to make sure that happened. That's what I needed to see. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll take the hit.
Personally, though, like going up to Rogue One, the one thing I wanted to see in this film more than anything was Vader murdering fools. And like leading up to that point, I was like, because when he turns around, he's like, prepare a boarding party, and he turns around, I'm like, okay, he's talking about the boarding party from the beginning of A New Hope on the Tantive 4.
Right,
and then you see the shuttle coming up to the capital ship, and you're like, oh god, this isn't happening. And you know they're going to get the plans where they need to go. We've all seen Star Wars, A New Hope. We knew they were going to get there. Why not have some fun in the process and just watch him mow some fuckers down, you know? Like, and that's what I wanted to see, and it was everything I thought it could be and more. Like, I could watch a whole movie of just him just murdering people left and right, just like that on a continuous loop for an hour and a half. I could do it.
And
Chris said the same thing.
I did.
and for me as an actor, again, you know, what really sold that for me was the response of the soldiers, of just seeing the utter terror in their faces and it being believable. Not, you know, I believe that those guys in that thing were not acting, that they were literally scared for their life.
Yeah.
When they saw Vader coming down the hallway.
Well, I mean, Vader was set up that way throughout the whole entire movie, even before you really like caught a glimpse that Vader was even going to be in the movie. Like when Bodhi was captured by Saw Gerrera, and Saw had to take that breath on that machine, and it kind of sounded like that Vader breath.
Yep.
The reaction from Bodhi told you that Darth Vader really was like the Freddy Krueger of the galaxy at that point. Like, people
and that's
were
what I
scared
like
to
that
death of him.
The boogeyman incarnate.
The new canon has really done is bringing Vader back to being that, of being the guys that the parents tell their kids at night, you better behave or Vader will come and get you. Yeah. Of being that boogeyman, of being that just menace if you see Vader, it's already too late.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the Vader that I like that they've brought back, that if Vader's in your town or Vader's in your house, it's too late.
You're done, yeah.
Yeah, I know. In other words, talk all the shit you want about Vader and his asthmatic ways. He's gonna murder you, and that's the end of it.
Well, see, one of the things about that hallway scene, a lot of people say is it was just fan service. Yeah, sure it was, but I mean, it served a purpose. We talked about it last night.
Yeah.
It explained why Vader was so pissed off at the beginning of Episode 4. When he was choking out the captain of the
absolutely.
Captain Antilles, yeah.
You know, and screaming at his people about finding those plans and everything. He hadn't been that pissed off in the rest of the trilogy. Why was he mad?
Yeah.
Well, you see, he was like 30 feet away from grabbing those plans and ending this threat before it started.
He took it personally.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, he did.
Exactly.
It also explains why can explain, you know, why in Episode 4 he seemed slower. Because he had just spent a lot of energy in that hallway scene, and he hadn't been back to his bacta tank. He hadn't had time to heal. He hadn't time to really, you know, rejuvenate himself. So he was just going he'd just gone full throttle, and he hadn't had time to really, you know, rejuvenate.
Well, I've heard a theory. I've also heard, not really a theory, but kind of a pseudo explanation for why he's so slow in A New Hope compared to Rogue One. Because really, the only time you really see Vader in action in New Hope is against Obi-Wan. And so a lot of people are coming forward saying, well, you know, he's just toying with Obi-Wan. Maybe he didn't want to take Obi-Wan down as quickly as he wanted, as he could have, you know, stuff like it, just toying with him, really. And then finally the last swipe came in. And I would kind of subscribe to that a little bit, because there was a lot of verbal taunting going back and forth between those two during that duel. Mm-hmm. But I'm not entirely sure what the canon explanation is for the change in intensity.
One of the things I've heard is that, you know, this was the man who took his arms and legs. This is the man who made him, and he's wary. He doesn't want to make the same mistake. He doesn't want to. So he's just kind of, it's not that he's toying with him, he's testing the waters. He's saying, okay, what does this old man still have? Is
That
he,
would make
you know,
sense,
can he
yeah.
still go? Can he still,
Yeah, that makes sense.
you know, he's not necessarily that he's like toying with him. He's like, this is the guy that put me in this suit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's old, but I know what a Jedi can do at any age.
Yeah.
True that. He saw Master Yoda.
Well, see
Yeah.
that I'll agree with both of your theories on that because of the fact that like even in the hallway scene, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, especially Mario, you got to calm down, man. You talk too much.
I know the youngling is awful quiet.
Yeah, he is. I want to get his opinion and all, but I don't feel that his reactions were any faster or more intense than they were in Empire. Like they did still scale
Yeah.
Vader back. I mean, it wasn't like Hayden Christensen on Mustafar type Vader. It was definitely, you know, original trilogy Vader speed and style. So I mean, they still added the hindrance of the suit to Vader, and made him more of a hack and slash and less of the finesse sword fighter.
And really, I'd buy that too, just because he was up against a bunch of rebels with blasters who were terrified, shitless, you know. And I mean, yeah, he's gonna mow through them and look awesome compared to them. You know, when he's up against a Jedi with a lightsaber, he's gonna be, you know, matching moves for move. Yeah, I would buy that also. I really would.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense.
I mean, if you look back at his first duel against Obi-Wan on Mustafar, he let his pride get the better of him. That's why he lost. He thought he was better than Obi-Wan. He thought it was holding him back, and Obi-Wan's like, last warning, this is not a good idea. And he went ahead anyway, and he lost it. So he's going to be slow. He's going to be cautious. He's going to say, okay, let's think this one through. I almost lost my life this time, and I want to kill this guy. I got to kill him before he attempts to kill me, and I'm a hell of a lot slower. Plus, we also know if he didn't have those hindrances, imagine how fast he really would be. I mean, the Emperor specifically made him a Frankenstein to slow him down, because if he could actually use the Force to make it more of a fluid motion, imagine how much more dangerous he could be.
Well, is that modern canon? I know that was in Legends, you know, and deeply explored in a great book, Dark Lord: Rise of Darth Vader. But I mean, I don't know if that explanation has still stood in the current canon.
I don't think they've touched on the new canon, not that I can think of. Because the only place I could think of them even mentioning it right now would be Lords of the Sith, the novel Lords of the Sith.
Great novel.
Although it could be touched on in June when the new Vader comic series comes out, because it's supposed to be Vader Year One. They may touch on it.
Is it Dark Horse or Marvel?
It's Marvel.
It's Marvel.
The last Darth Vader run on Marvel, the 25 issue.
Oh, it was
awesome.
Awesome.
And this week,
When Vader learns who Luke is,
and you see the window cracking. Yeah.
And I loved in that series when they had the first real showdown between Luke and Vader on that planet.
Second
I love
issue,
the fact that Vader just basically just bitch slapped him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
This wasn't like the confident Luke that's going to be like, aha, I'm standing toe to toe. And Vader's like, no, you don't even deserve to be in the same room as me.
Well, you know what?
And what else was funny about that particular duel? The line he said, because it wasn't until the second issue when they picked back up on that duel, when Luke looks up and says, "You killed my father," and you're going to answer for that. And Vader's like, "You're going to have to be more specific. I've killed many fathers." You know, like it's. And then people have problems with the choke on your aspiration line. They're kind of close,
Vader is full of puns.
Oh, he is.
I like if you've how it should have ended. Vader's full of dad jokes.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah.
But you know, it's funny though. It's actually the comic book.
My favorite Vader put down is, of course, apology accepted, Captain Data.
Oh, absolutely amazing.
Yes.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's disturbing.
Well, that was dripping with sarcasm. You know, I mean,
Yes.
It's true.
But you know what? When Disney took over the Star Wars franchise and Lucasfilm, the thing that made me breathe a sigh of relief was not The Force Awakens, was not the recasting of the original characters. It was literally a comic book. Vader Down. That one scene
Oh.
where he just crash landed, and you go to the panel where he's surrounded by the rebels, and they're telling him to give up. You're surrounded, and he just ignites his lightsaber, and he says, "I'm only surrounded by fear and dead men."
My favorite line in a comic book.
Oh,
Right then and there,
beautiful
I
line.
said, "That's when I breathed a
Yes.
sigh of relief," and I said, "They've got this. They know."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that panel alone was what made me want to see Vader brutally murdering people in Rogue One, because it was coming, and I wanted to see Vader like that again. I really did.
I also like the scene in the Vader comic with the duel with Luke, where Vader loses his helmet, and that stormtrooper comes up on him. It's like, oh God, no! What?
Mother of
And then
Luke.
his head is spin all
Yeah.
the way around. I was like,
Yep.
yeah,
Oh God.
Yeah.
that was just
Speaking of
Yeah.
So,
another great comic
question-
book run. Sorry, go ahead.
Vader standalone, yes or no?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So next
Yes.
question:
Yeah.
Hayden in the suit. Hayden has said
Oh.
No,
he wanted to be in the suit.
no. I'm all for Hayden being Anakin, but Anakin and Darth Vader are two different people, as so should be the actors. I believe somebody else should be Darth Vader and somebody else should be Anakin Skywalker. I really do. I mean, you can see the size difference in Revenge of the Sith when it was Hayden inside the suit, and it didn't do it for me, to be honest.
Oh,
So
why
here's
not?
another question.
Why not?
Eventually, James Earl Jones sadly will eventually no longer be with us, and he's getting up there in age. And I don't know if he's keen on doing the role that much longer. But do you think that once he passes, that should be the end of Vader, or should they recast somebody to the voice? Because part of Vader is that voice, is that iconic James Earl Jones voice, and I think that's what made in the Rebels TV series that Vader really stand out, is the fact that they got James Earl Jones to do the voice for it.
Well, we've had other actors do the voice before too. I mean, if you think back to the Force Unleashed video games, that was another actor.
Yeah.
He was pretty spot on. So I mean,
Yeah.
I'm gonna
The
treat
modulation could have been tweaked a little bit and made it sound more like Vader, but I mean, other than that, he had the accent down.
I
perfect.
think I would
Yeah.
treat it the same way as I would treat Leia. Is I would do more without James Earl Jones if the story line is not done. If Vader should be in some other story, then absolutely recast.
Yeah.
But recast correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this is one where I think I may be in the minority of, with the Han Solo movie, do you want Vader in that one?
No.
No.
Or do you think he fits? I agree.
No.
Vader does. I
Overkill.
don't, yeah.
No.
I can't believe I'll say this. I would put Boba Fett in it, though.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Well, yeah.
That would fit, yeah.
Makes sense. Especially if you can tell a story of how they got of how Fett came to hate Solo so much.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
See,
Why
even
we
if,
want that.
well, we already know in the Han Solo film they're going to touch on how Han and Chewie met, and we know the story behind that. He freed him Chewie was an Imperial slave. We get that, which I don't know if I can say this or not. Have you guys read Thrawn yet?
No.
I have-
halfway through.
Okay, never
Okay.
mind. There's a part in there that may or may not reference that. I'm not positive yet, but I mean that would be Han kind of brushing with the Empire a little bit. But I think if you put Vader in there, that would just be shoehorning him in, to be
Yeah.
honest. And I
Yeah.
don't think it would be needed.
I think it would be out of place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It would be very out of place. I mean, if you could include like other minor bounty hunters and kind of show it all, how it all kind of gels with Han Solo as the centerpiece, yeah,
Mhm.
it would work. But
Yeah.
And I also don't want, and again, I mean, I don't want Jedi on this one either, because if you put Jedi in it, that puts, or anybody with like strong, like I wouldn't mind seeing, like if you're going to do a Jedi, maybe put someone in who's in hiding, and just, I don't want to see lightsabers. I just want to see, maybe something as small as, Han's in a predicament, he can't get out, and then somehow something, the lock happens to, that lock is unlocked now. How did that happen? Something like that, but I don't want to see full-on lightsaber duels and, stuff like that with the Force, because there's been talk about maybe having I can't even think of the Jedi's name, but
Quinlan
there's been
Voss?
talk about having at least maybe one Jedi in it in hiding.
Quaylen
Really?
Voss.
I
Quaylen
don't
Voss
know.
would make
Yeah.
sense. Quaylen Voss, I think, would make sense just because he has had
That's
experience
false.
in his stories. He has had experience of going undercover as like a bounty hunter or an assassin and stuff of that nature. So if you
Mhm.
have to involve a Jedi in the Han Solo story, I would say he'd probably be the
This
most
would make the
logical
most sense.
choice.
Voss would make the most sense.
Yeah.
Or even, yeah.
I think
Or-
the Force should have some sort of presence, but I don't think it should be a Jedi. I think if you went any route, maybe have another Guardian of the Wills who speaks
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the Jedi reverently, and that kind of
Yeah,
gives
I'd be all right
Han
with that.
his outlook
Yeah.
of the mumbo jumbo and simple tricks and nonsense type attitude.
Because that's one thing I never understood about why, Han Solo, talking about, oh, I don't believe in the Force, it's just mumbo jumbo, all this, old nonsense. He would have been old because he has been about Boba's age, so he'd have been old enough to remember the Clone Wars
Right.
and to remember the Jedi. So that's one thing that never made sense was if he had old enough to have been, alive during the Clone Wars to remember the Jedi, how did he have such,
Well, you got to think
feeling
too.
of not believing in it?
You got to think too. At the beginning of the Clone Wars, Boba was what, about 8 years old?
Beginning of the Clone Wars,
Like 10.
he was like 9 or he was about like 9 or 10.
Okay. Now think about it this way. Most of you guys are young enough, so I can make this comparison. You guys remember the Gulf War, Desert Storm? Not the current Gulf War, but the previous one in the 90s.
I do.
Remember it?
I do. Not
Okay.
vaguely, vividly.
I was about to say,
Yeah.
not vividly, right?
I was in
Think
high
about-
school, so yeah.
Think about a 10-year-old Han Solo who was probably more interested in watching cartoons on the HoloNet.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
So
Yeah, because if he was 10 years old
point.
about that time, by the time the Jedi Purge happened, the Empire would have been in charge of any propaganda or whatnot, and and mainstream media. So I mean, he wouldn't have really known about anything, to be honest.
Yeah, the only reason why Boba knew is because he was in the middle of it.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And he saw his dad get his head lopped up by Mace Windu. I mean, that would definitely put an impact on my life.
Well, think about how screwed
yeah.
Boba Fett has to be too. First off, I'm a clone of my dad. I saw my
Yeah.
dad killed and died, but yet I have to see my dad's face in every Republic soldier.
Yes.
How much
yeah.
of a mind
or every
job?
time I look in the mirror.
Yeah, how much of a mind
Yeah.
job has that got to be on that
Yeah.
guy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It really does. A lot of people gave George Lucas a lot of hell about replacing the voice of Boba Fett in Empire and Jedi, and the whole entire clones and Boba being a clone because the original story he was a female jaded lover of Han Solo, but you just never knew that. But I think that was brilliant on George's part because it really fleshed out more of an explanation on why Boba was so dangerous and venomous. Like, as cold-hearted as he was. I mean, you just think about the shit he's seen.
Yeah.
See, though,
Yeah.
the one thing I would have done differently, though, as far as Boba Fett goes in Episode 2, and it wouldn't even have affected anything at all, but why did Boba have to be a clone of Jango? Why couldn't Boba have just been Jango's son? Because then he could have grown up. We still wouldn't have known what he looked like under the mask. He wouldn't have had the same voice. I don't get why he had to have been, why that had to be squeezed in that he was a clone of Jango, not just his son. It never made any sense to me. I mean, it makes sense the way they did it, but it doesn't make sense why that had to be part of the story, or what effect it had on the overall story.
Oh, the only thing you think of is with the rapid cell his rapid aging made it easier to train him in a shorter amount of time.
No,
That's
Boba was
Boba didn't
unaltered.
have the
Yeah, but he didn't have
Yeah,
it.
Boba was unaltered.
yeah.
I thought it was just unaltered in his personality, but not his growth.
No,
No, everything was unaltered.
completely unaltered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he would have aged the same as like a normal child
Right.
would have, a normal
Right.
person.
Hmm.
So
I guess it's going to
Sorry,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, I guess the only explanation I can give to it is because of the fact that Django, because of his lifestyle and everything else, wouldn't have a wife.
Well, that's true too.
That's the only
true.
explanation on why make him a clone is he wouldn't settle down. He wouldn't have a family. It probably was a
Right.
weird enough request to turn around and have a clone, unaltered clone of himself to raise as a child. Was probably out of character for Django in its own right.
Right. See, I would have almost
Yeah.
done something along the lines, though, of Django had a family, and then his wife was murdered by, I don't know, the Jedi or something, and then, or something like that, and then he became Scorn, became a bounty hunter. You know what I mean? There were different ways you could have probably went. They could have probably went about it, but I mean, we got what we got, and I really can't complain about it. It's still awesome.
Right, absolutely.
But
Yeah.
Well, and that's one thing we're going to be in one of the next episodes coming up. We're going to be talking about is changes we would make to some of the movies. We're going to start with episode 1 and just talk about changes we would make to the movies that would not drastically change the outcome of the entire saga. So,
Which,
I can think of a couple of things.
which means Jar Jar Binks has to stay.
Well, I was thinking more. I hear everyone say, "Well, Qui-Gon has to live. Qui-Gon has to live." No, because Qui-Gon dying is what makes everything else happen. Qui-Gon lives, Anakin doesn't turn into Vader.
Right.
I can almost, if the way they portray that character, Qui-Gon lives, Anakin stays, Anakin and everything is happy.
Hmm.
It was the fact of Qui-Gon dying and then Obi-Wan taking on that mantle of training Anakin and, again, hate to say it, failing miserably.
Yeah.
Ouch.
And,
True.
Hey,
that's
let
what
me-
led up to him being Vader.
let me pose you guys this question real quick, because I think Qui-Gon would have. Do you think that over that first 10 years of Anakin's training, if Obi-Wan had let Anakin go visit his mother once in a while, do you think things would have been differently, or would played out differently? Because I feel like Qui-Gon would have allowed him to do that because he had such a strong connection with her. If
I think
Obi-Wan
so.
did that, do you think it turned out different?
Can I just throw this in real quick? I think Mario should
Sure.
answer first because he hasn't spoken this whole entire podcast.
He really hasn't.
Well, okay, I would say normally no, just because I don't think. Well, one, if Obi-Wan was to do that, but you're talking about Obi-Wan leading him, right? Yeah, I think if the council found out about that, they'd be really, how do you say it, disappointed in Obi-Wan because, the whole thing is leave your old life behind.
Yeah.
Free yourself the attachments and stuff. So if you leave him with his mother, let him see like a, foster situation, like every now and then you see your actual mother. I feel it would have made, if she still had died, made it even worse because, he was there, but the fact is that, he wasn't always there. He only, let's just say she died the day that he left. The day before, it would have torn him up more. And then he would have probably, maybe he debated with Obi-Wan, like, hey, if you would have let me stay, an extra day, I could have saved her. But you had to bring me back.
Yeah.
I think it would have just only increased, his fall eventually if she still had died.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's a great point, actually. I didn't think of that.
I actually agree with him on that 100%. I think when you break it down to its essentials, I think Anakin's fall from grace was the will of the Force.
Yeah.
I really think it had to be. No matter how you change the situation, even if Qui-Gon had survived and trained Anakin, I think his arrogance, his age, his natural ability with the Force, all of that combined would have eventually led him down the wrong path anyway. Plus, you're forgetting the one major factor in this whole entire thing. You've got Senator Sheev Palpatine in your ear the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
True that.
Yeah, I think no matter what, I think you're right because I think once Palpatine got in his ear,
Mhm.
that was the beginning of the end. I think even Qui-Gon would have. I think with Qui-Gon training him, you probably wouldn't have had, because I think he would have seen the connection between him and Padme, and would have eventually either said either done what Obi-Wan did, which is nothing, or he would have nipped it in the bud immediately. He would have sensed that, okay, this is getting too close. Let's pull you back.
Yeah.
You know, because I still think, even though I don't know if it's ever been touched in, but there's no way Yoda didn't know.
Oh, there's no way.
There's no way Yoda, and I don't think there's no way Obi-Wan didn't know.
Well, in the novelization of Revenge of the Sith, there's one scene in there where Obi-Wan is talking to Padme, and he essentially tells Padme he's known the whole time that they were together and just didn't say anything because it made Anakin happy.
Yeah.
But as far as we know, it's not canon anymore. Just because
even in the movies.
Well, no, the movie books are still canon.
Well, only Force Awakens and Rogue One. The other ones are no longer canon.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, really.
Well, I know the original trilogy is canon because they re-released it.
Yeah, they re-released in the Lucasfilm Press books, the real crappy children's books versions of them.
No.
Are those the ones you're referring to?
No. I've got a brand new trilogy book, all three movie books of 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah. That one is canon. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say in the scene when Vader just has attacked the temple and Obi-Wan goes to Padme, and he says the line, "The children are Anakin's, aren't you?" He says that with no shock, no surprise, just, yeah, they're his. Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
So, right now it's just all fan speculation, but I think that the way that line was delivered, it was delivered with, "I've always known."
Anakin is the father, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, yep.
I'm so sorry. And that was such a, you know what? Again, one of the greatest things that came from the prequels.
That line alone was gut-wrenching.
Oh, that's it. You can pick on the prequels all you want. I know we'll get into it next week, really. But the one saving grace was Ewan McGregor's performance as Obi-Wan Kenobi. I mean, that one line alone was so believable. And I mean, if you want heart-wrenching, it's right after he beats Vader. And that, I mean, you felt it. You were the chosen one. You felt the disappointment and heartbreak in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even hearing how he prepared for that role of watching hours and hours of Alec Guinness perform the original Obi-Wan to get the cadence down, to get how he spoke, the way he acted down, that just shows, such dedication to that role. And the fact that he almost turned it down.
Yeah.
He almost, because of Dennis Larson.
Oh, yeah, don't do Star Wars.
That's his uncle, yeah. Yep.
And he called his uncle and said, "I'm up for this part." And at the time, he'd been known for mostly doing indie roles, smaller roles, and he didn't want to do this because it's like, oh, this is Star Wars. This is going to be big and huge. I don't know if I really want to do this. And his uncle Dennis said, "No, don't." And thankfully, he didn't listen to him because we got a great Obi-Wan.
Well, I was kind of the same way when they first announced Ewan McGregor as young Obi-Wan. I'm like, you're going to replace Alec Guinness with the guy from Train Spotting?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that was, yeah, I know. It was right after I had seen that movie, too. I was like, well, he is a bit of a method actor. That could pay up in his favor,
Yeah, but, he
could pull it off.
My first thought was like, no, it's not going to work. Glad I was wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I see we're running low. We're running low on time, so let's get this wrapped up here. And why don't we go around and tell us where we can find everyone and any special projects you want to plug. We'll start at the top. Mario, where can everybody see you and reach you?
Okay, so you can follow my YouTube channel at SithLord310 and on Twitter at MAH18299.
All right.
All right, Chris?
You can find me on Breaking the Fourth Wall. That's also our YouTube channel. RadioCastFM.com. I'm DJ Chris Wild. Monday nights, Raise the Underground. You can find me on Twitter at Chris Wild. You can find me on Facebook at Christopher Michael Stolle. Pretty much I'm everywhere.
And Brian?
I run a website called StarWarsCanonLibrary.com. I also have a YouTube channel of the same name. And if you guys like the website or the YouTube channel very much, you guys can check out the Facebook also. It's just Facebook.com/StarWarsCanonLibrary.
And Matthew, I got your name right.
Yeah, that's Tom. You can find me at Matthew Cruz, Matthew with 2 T's on Facebook. And you can also catch me on if you want to email me at Fox with 2 X's, 77 at gmail.com. Hey, drop me a note, say what's up. And yes, I am going to plug my project. We're going to be starting a Pathfinder startup D&D style podcast on YouTube. It'll be called Gaming XP.
Cool. And you can find me on Facebook at Mark Tolley and on the Twitter machine at mark.tolley77. And you can also find me on my YouTube channel, Nerdy. Anyway, yeah, you can find me on YouTube at
Nerdy.
I can't remember my own YouTube page. I just started up. I can't remember
Nerdy
now.
Observations.
Nerdy
Nerdy
Observations.
Observations. Thank